Okay, so back to the continuation of the corrupt coworkers. I'm going to go straight into Josh, who is a Gemini, and to give you a little of his backstory, that he had come from a drug riddled home um, with some different demons and struggles to where I think he was 17, 18, something like that at the time, and was actually living with his girlfriend who was a bit older than him. She was Puerto Rican and a Scorpio, but that his household upbringing was so rough that, he was moved out of it. I recall a day of his biological father showing up on the job, and this was at a time before I knew of his particular struggle. And so I knew they seemed a little distant, but I didn't think much about it. And lo and behold, some time later, this is what I came to find out about him. And then maybe this would have made sense of some of his action, some of the things he did, at the time in question. And so, at the time of my transition into customer service, he, like so many others, distanced himself from me and got caught up in little gossip. One day made a halfway joke or something, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And so I remember like confronting him about it, and like our relationship never being the same thereafter. When I started, he was a bagger. He moved up to cashier, from cashier to customer service within a very short amount of time. I feel like the way that Josh did this was with his personality, his demeanor, mannerisms, a very funny guy, good with kids, women, families, like just entertaining, just a life of the party type of individual. But again, when I transitioned, Eddie became a part of, like, he started to follow many of my enemies, and that automatically made me distance myself from him. But throughout the transition of me already being in customer service and him moving up too, he befriended one of my key enemies, one of the biggest ones, which was Dana, a Capricorn. I'll get into her after him. White girl. She was a part of the customer service crew, one of the supervisors, if I'm not mistaken. And so she was in a position of authority for real, and he got really close to her and actually started sleeping with her, flirting with her on the job, devoting all of his time and attention to her, on the job, completely distancing himself from me and others, whom I guess he estimated as unable to get him to where he was trying to be at the time. And so he would talk to me still in little conversations here and there, and at one point admitted to her sharing with him one late night before dropping him off that she had found a way to steal money from the company and was sort of inviting him in on it, and even a way of stealing money from cashiers and getting people set up and put on probation and eventually asked to leave because their drawers keep coming up short. Eventually, the same thing happened to me, and that was where all of the trouble really sparked for me. But then she failed to realize that before he fully transitioned to being on her side, um, he had shared these things with me. And so I doubled back and I shared those things with or attempted to share those things with management, and the information was refused. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to know by the time. And so that Josh had went by hook or by crook, it seems, to get that customer service position, and at some point even lost it again and then was demoted back to cashier. And so one of my last memories of Josh was at a Christmas party. Everyone was having a good time freestyling, and that was supposedly his stick, that he wanted to be an artist, outside of working in a store. And it was his turn to freestyle. I think he went last, and he completely choked and could not even complete his freestyle, just was shamed and um, forever silence, like just became a whole different person at that moment. And I know that the tension and a lot of the information that was floating about, and him knowing that I was at the source of it, and then me being at the party and kind of right in his face and like clearly not feeling his vibe, got to his soul and spirit. And what I'll say about Josh, because I refuse to really say anything to him, as he was nothing more than really a follower. Um, is, what is it to gain the world but to lose your soul, and to gain the fame and popularity but to have done it at the cost of your own dignity and pride as a man, as a black man, as a person. I know that he was very young at that time, so a lot of it I'm just going to look past. But the saddest part about Josh is that he actually had it. If anybody had a magic touch that could make it off of their talent, it was Josh. But it goes to show that a person with low self-esteem will always be the last one to know, and the first to do anything and sabotage, betray anyone for the title, whatever that might be. But I actually made it to where you guys were working so hard, and I didn't officially make it either, but without really trying, and just by putting my best foot forward every day. And it paid off for me quickly. Just not in the long term, and so even for me, honey, it wasn't lucrative. The time spent, it wasn't worth it. And so for people like Josh, I hope that there comes a day, if there hasn't already, that he's able to look in the mirror and feel good about himself and his actions in the dark and the light. Moving right along. So there were also 2 Libras, and if I hadn't mentioned that on this job, I felt like it was a replica of my childhood, because there were so many cardinal signs and a repetition of them. So Capricorn, Cancer, and Libra, not so much as Aries, and then a few Geminis were thrown in there, but for the most part, the formulation of squares. And what that means in astrology, guys, it's like the hardest relationship to formulate, and 2 people working with some of the same energies but different expressions, trying to impose upon each other, but you're both leaders, so it's never going to work, and it's going to be this constant struggle. That's exactly what this job was like. Even when it came to the people in charge, it was a lot of repetition of the same signs. And so the next 2 were Libras. Eric, he was a white guy, great smile, always winking, a person that helped me in my training. I won't go deep into Eric because he was really just a narcissist and fake as fuck and a coattail writer, so just not worth, I feel like excessive explanation over. But I will say this, that he used to talk to me low-key about Karen, who was a real overseer, supervisor, Capricorn, white lady, that she used to always pick him apart and make him feel like he wasn't enough. Good enough that was, but again, he was one of the people at the very top of his customer service, but then also one of the ones at the very top of his insecurity. And so one of the games that the management was playing on everybody was happened to him prior to it happening to me, and that's where you offend them personally, and they start to dock your pay and impact your pockets and your hours based off of their personal interactions with you. And there came a time that Eric could not afford shoes, clothes, a haircut. This guy was a perfectionist and a pretty boy. Again, he was a Libra. His image was everything, and I recall his self-esteem being very lower. And so psychological and subliminally, that these women were behind the scenes, meaning the women in charge, lowering people's self-esteem that they felt, I feel, had the potential to replace them. Because it was always the people that were the best that were kept at the lowest, and then probably made to feel so insecure. And this was what led to so many attacks and them being so easy to board the bandwagon of the hate train. Okay. And so I recall Eric when he had his time, and this silent desperation in him, this whole shift in his personality. He used to be like this beacon of light person, and just this time where he was just really, really mellow. He had lost his position in customer service, I think, off of a mistake, and was back to just regular cashiering, and lost all of his power, and just had lost his whole persona, like his soul. It seemed when he went through his suspension over having made a mistake. But when he got back, I remember him bouncing back and having like this pep in his step, his hair you know, his hair cut back dressed and smelling good, looking good and fresh, and being extra extra. And then in the time that he was gone, that I had grew, and the stuff I used to need his help on, not needing it anymore, and being like this pertinent threat to his comeback, and then being thrown under the bus by him. And again, him joining that bandwagon, but all the while with a cheap smile and a wink and being friendly in your face. I recall a time that it got so real, the dislike between us. They used to always have little conversations out of tension, I think, and contention. And I used to be like, Eric, shut the fuck up, because you're not talking for real. You're just talking to, you know, try to avoid the awkwardness. Like, you know, I don't like you. You know, I'm feeling like you don't like me too. So just be real. And the one time being silent in the break room, he and I just eating in complete silence, and it just being very much etched in stone at that time, in silence, actually, that we don't fuck with each other, and that's forever. And so I really have nothing to say to him directly, and so moving right along. Now I do see that I'm running a little bit on my time, and I'm going to get into the next two. These girls were like the primary manipulators. I feel like the individuals that my ex, the dark side of Sagittarius, was working directly with, that he might have been sleeping with, is no telling. I put nothing past him or them that might have been competing with me for him, on top of professionally, and the girls directly tied into the downfall, just, you know. And so to stay tuned for that. Whether it seems like it or not, it's getting more and more difficult, and so I want to be sure to pace myself and be thorough at the same time. So until the next time.